Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. And you might think, what the hell has this sea of green of different types of dendrobiums got in common? What they've got in common is how I treat them. And one of them is getting treated totally wrong. But have a think about the consequences when we find out which one that is. Okay, so represented here we have a nobile hybrid. We have a Dendrobium phalaenopsis type. That's actually a named hybrid. We have my only representative of the antelope type. And tucked up the back there, we have a Latoria type. That's actually got some nice buds on. That's not why it's being filmed. And then we have Hercoglossum. Does this one look anything like that lot? There are a lot of similarities here on the table. That one doesn't fit the bill, does it? But it's here for a good reason. It's actually got some buds on. Ooh, that's well out of season. That's not normal at all. But it just does that now and again. Anyway, I'll have to start at the front so that I can move them out the way and go over the reason why they're here. Okay? The reason why the ones are on the table all together is that they get treated so similar, the difference is hardly noticeable. And, you know, my Latorias are new to me, so I don't even know how I'm going to treat them in the winter will affect the plants yet, because I haven't got there. This will be their first winter. However, the others have been around a while, so we can work on them. Now, Dendrobium phalaenopsis type, loads and loads of hybrids in amongst here and a vast array of colours, and these will tolerate growing in the home quite well. You know, they just do. They don't need the high humidity. If they can get it, they might grow a bit better, but it doesn't stop them growing and blooming. They don't need real special care. The easiest way I can explain to look after Dendrobium phalaenopsis types is that if you grow these well in your home, then you can grow these. All these need that's different to phalaenopsis, the real thing, as opposed to Dendrobium phalaenopsis, all these need is a bit more light. The rest of it is fine. Temperatures, yeah, they'll tolerate lower humidity. Not silly low humidity. You can't go too far. You push your boundaries too far, your plant won't do as well. But they'll tolerate it. You know, the hybridization process, especially the Yamamoto type hybrids, has done wonders to make these along the same lines as these, as far as growing conditions are concerned, but they do need a bit more light. Yeah? So apart from that, same sort of temperature range, don't get them cold, and don't let them stay dry for any length of time. Now we go back to me in the UK. Yeah? This is actively growing at the moment. Yeah? I mean, it's this was its last cane, and it grew that one during the winter. That was the one it produced towards the end of last year, and the winter one is a bit short. You know, it got to maturity without getting to the sort of size it's capable of getting to because of the short days. That was the best it could do, but now it's having another go in the growing season, and already you can see this latest growth is as big at the base as this giant cane here, and a lot bigger at the base than this last growth it grew. So this one I expect to push on somewhere up between these two. I may never achieve this cane size ever again. That's the one it had when I got it. Yeah? And this one had leaves on when I've got it. They've long since gone. Dendrobium phalaenopsis types are eventually deciduous, but they hold their leaves for quite a few years, depending on what's gone into the you know, the actual hybrid. Some of them are a bit more deciduous than others, but most of them hold their leaves for many years. So you've got some greenery around for quite a while. They tend to bloom out of the top, but not always. And again, it depends on the makeup of the hybrid, whether it's got that multi-spike trait on it or not. I don't think this one will bloom. It might surprise me. This one's been around a while and it still hasn't bloomed. Again, it could surprise me. You never know. This one better bloom. Otherwise, it's a lot of green and no flowers. So it'll be pushing its luck. But blooms on this are very attractive. And I expect that one to bloom. Because of the time of year it's growing, I know roughly when it's going to mature. And it'll mature just at the right time to actually produce some blooms, you know, a bit later on in its life. Phalaenopsis types don't tend to bloom until the canes are mature. That's not true of all dendrobiums, but it certainly is in the majority of these. So that's your Phalaenopsis type. Don't let them get cold. They don't need a chill. So all what you've heard about this winter resting cobblers, throw that out the window for Phalaenopsis types. They don't need it. They're continuous growers. Where they come from, their seasonal changes tends to be mainly from wet to drier. The temperature range doesn't change a huge amount. You don't tend to find the Dendrobium Phalaenopsis right up the top of a mountain either. So they like some warmth. And if you can give them some humidity as well, all the better. But with the hybrids, not absolutely essential. So that's that one. Ooh, you're on me flipping knees here. If I get dirty knees, there'd be trouble. Right, so now this one I haven't had long, so I'm not the world's leading expert on this type. And although it's a hybrid, it's my only representative of the antelope types. It's all in the name, you know. It's actually called black antelope. And boy, am I looking forward. I've seen a picture of what these look like. And they are almost black, but they do have that antelope shape, those twisty petals and sepals. Now you've decided, oh yes, I was going to say it's decided not to go back in the pot. They tend to do that. Now when I got this plant, this was the mature cane. There's no sign of any spikes on that. And it doesn't look like it's actually bloomed yet. But I have 3 strong new growths pushing up here to make this into a good, strong, healthy plant in one foul swoop. So 3 new growths coming up all at once. These 2 have pushed on at a phenomenal rate since they started. I think this was the new growth that was on it when I got it. That's showing signs of maturity, even though it's not the same size as that big cane next to it, because the sheaths tend to go darker, and they go darker farther up the cane as it matures. You can see there's a mature cane. The dark sheaths, the dry ones, the straw-coloured ones, go nearly up to the top, whereas these don't, and these haven't even got any yet. So you can see the progression as you go along. So this could bloom on any of these 4 canes. Yeah, well, get on with it then. Just sit there going green all the time and getting bigger. When the blooms will come, I don't know. I haven't had the plant long enough. But again, the antelope type, they are continuous growers where they come from. You can get a bit of a feel for it after a while. You start looking at these canes and what they look like. This is going to be an exception in a minute because it's a nobly hybrid. But the way I'm going to treat this, I don't know whether it's going to work or not, is I'm going to treat this exactly the same as the Phalaenopsis type. Yeah, so the Dendrobium Phalaenopsis and my only antelope type will be treated the same. I'll get to what I'm going to do in a minute. Because, this is one of my Latorias, all of which are recent acquisitions. So again, this will be their first winter. But again, where they come from, they're subject to continuous growth, albeit perhaps at different rates. Now, what have we got here? I'm sure there's another new growth. Oh yeah, here it is. It's hiding round here. Now you can see this growth is pushing on. The leaves do often stick a bit like that. I sometimes help them, but they'll push out and open on their own. But again, looking at it, it has a lot of similarities in appearance to the Dendrobium phalaenopsis one, and also the antelope one. The difference with the antelope one is it has a lot more leaves on the cane. The Latoria type and the phalaenopsis type tend to have their leaves at the top of the canes. That's just traits of the plant. That's got nothing to do with their care at all. And again, this is going to go into the winter for the first time. It's going to have some... so that's 2 spikes coming out of the top of the same cane, 4 buds on one and 2 on the other. So we'll have 6 blooms here that potentially can last 2 or even 3 months. So, you know, in my book, good value for money. Okay, so that's one of my Latoria types. Given my Latoria types that I've got, that's one of the larger ones. Yeah? Compared with that beast, it's never going to get that big. You know, if it's blooming on that size cane, that's probably roughly the size that the canes are ever going to get. And I'd call that a reasonably compact plant. Medium-sized Cattleya size. You know, I mean, that's the span of my hand from the top of the pot. Mind you, I haven't got big hands. But, yeah, so that's the size. Right, so those 3, Dendrobium phalaenopsis hybrid, my only antelope type, and my Latorias, in 2 of those cases, are going into the winter for the first time. And they will get my non-specific rest, because they are in the main continuous growers. So why don't I just water and feed them the same as I do all year round? The reason is, this is the UK. And in the UK winter, those day lengths are going to drop down to painfully short, with a lot of miserable, drizzly old weather tucked in there, which removes the sunlight. So we've not only got short day lengths, we haven't got good light either. So all 3 of those plants will slow right down. Doesn't matter what stage the growths are, whether there's new growths just starting, whether they're half mature, whether they're maturing, or whether they're matured, the plant itself will slow down. It just hasn't got enough light to continue growing at the rate it's doing now in the summer. And as you can see, that is a pretty strong rate of growth pushing out there. Yeah? Those are going to be some good canes. So, when we come to the winter time, in the autumn, I'm going to switch my fertiliser to a very low or 0 nitrogen based fertiliser. All the rest of the elements in the fertiliser can stay the same. And to achieve that, because I use RO water, is not going to be easy. And the only fertiliser I've found that I believe can do what I want it to do is the sort of fertiliser you would buy specifically for tomatoes. Now in the UK there's one called Tomarite, which everybody uses. It's great stuff and it's got next to no nitrogen in it. The other 2 main elements, you know, you've got N for nitrogen and then the pK. The pK is at normal levels. And on Tomarite itself, they will not disclose what else is in it. So they won't tell you what trace elements are in it, but they assure you that they're all there. There are other tomato type feeds on the market where they are declared if you're a bit fussed, but Tomarite just works, and I've got this recommended by quite a few good orchid growers that, you know, come the end of September, as we head into October, change your feed for your plants and harden them off ready for the UK winter. So get that nitrogen out. And obviously, once we start getting into November and we've got those really short days, the 3 orchids we've just looked at, they're not going to want much feed, are they? If they're going to slow right down and virtually stop growing, they won't get watered that often. And they probably will either approach or even get to dry before they get watered again. Now, many people have said, and I've read in many places, that the Latoria types are prone to rotting at the base if you keep them wet with cool temperatures. So what am I not going to do in the winter when I've got cool temperatures? Keep them soggy. Just not going to do it. So basically they will get relatively small amounts of water. They won't get 3 huge glassfuls poured in the top that all runs out the bottom, not in the winter time. They'll get a bit of water just to keep them little moist. Not soaked, just moist, and stop them drying out. And then they'll be allowed to dry. They won't stay dry for any length of time. This will be no more than a day or two before I spot the fact that they've gone dry. Another beauty of the clear pots. You can see when they're dry. So that's what I will be doing for those 3. They will take the temperatures they get. Not doing anything with them. They're not moving house or anything like that. They'll stay in here. They will have their low nighttime temperature maintained above 13.5 degrees. If we get -10 outside, it might drop a little bit below that because the heater will be pushing its luck to try and keep it up. This is nearly all glass here, and I'm not bubble wrapping the whole thing. I would rather spend a few extra pounds on heating than do that. I can't be bothered to take all these plants out and mess about with bubble wrap. I'd rather pay a few quid more. So that's those 3. Their winter treatment, summer treatment, you know, keep them moist, keep them fed, keep those growths doing that sort of thing. But all 3 of those are capable of pushing up new growths in the autumn, which have then got to try and grow in the winter, which in the UK they won't be as successful as they would be pushing out those new growths in the spring. But they have no real season. There is no real season. There isn't a specific blooming time like there is with many dendrobiums. These can bloom when they flipping feel like it. To be a better expression is they'll bloom when they're ready. Yeah? So when the canes are mature and their circumstances suit them, right sort of temperatures, water and feed, reasonable length days and everything, they'll push out the blooms. They're not stubborn or anything like that. All 3 of those types, quite easy going. Right, let's get on to the monster flipping thing. Now my knees hurt. What I do for you lot? This is probably my most vigorous Nobly hybrid. This is Prima Donna. It's still strapped up from when it went to a show earlier in the year and got 2nd place. I haven't even unstrapped it from those days. The reason I haven't bothered is because virtually all of the new canes are coming up around the outside. If I unstrap the middle bits with the old canes in, it will flop. And those bits of the plant, which are not a lot of use much more, will flop onto the nice new growths that are coming up all around the edge. So it's staying strapped until the autumn time when I inspect the older canes and I inspect those with leaves on. Those will bloom next year. They've already bloomed. These canes with leaves on here that are looking a bit old, you can see they've already bloomed, but they haven't bloomed everywhere yet. So they've still got some blooming to do. They'll do that next year. It might throw the odd bud out during this growing season, but I do have old leafless canes that have got flower spikes the full length of the cane, and on a plant that big and that vigorous, those canes are now nothing more than in the way. They're not going to drain the plant, it's too vigorous, but they're in the way, they look untidy, and they're coming off. Now whether you choose to take old canes off on Nobly hybrids is up to you. But I've got 1, 2, starting round the back, we've got 1 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 of these growing this year. Yeah? That's the future of the plant. Those 7 canes are what will take over from bits like this. And bits like this, if you look at the thickness that they were when they happily bloomed, these are a bit better, aren't they? So that one's going to bloom well next year. We'll probably go in a show again. Right, it's a Nobly hybrid. Now, it is renowned that Nobly hybrids need a proper winter rest or they will not bloom. Well, you can check back on my videos when that went into its show. It was a mass of blooms and it got a second place at an Orchid Society show. Did it get a winter rest? Did it hell? In fact, this will get treated exactly the same as those. It's not going anywhere, it's staying in here. So what it will get is the minimum temperatures in my grow room, which is down to 13.5, 14 at night times. I will try and raise it up during the day, but this one will get a subtle change. This one will get better light in the winter. Those don't need it. They don't need a change of light. They could do with more light in the winter because of our short days, but they don't need it to grow. That's not how those work, but these do. So these need to cool down a bit if you can. If they're living in your home, you won't be able to do that very well unless you've just got a cooler room, you know, like a spare room or something that you don't use. And if you can actually get them into a cooler room for the winter, especially if it's nice and close to a bright window, then you'll get more blooms. But you'll probably get some anyway. It's just what we're debating now is how well it's going to bloom, not if it's going to bloom. Now, if you've got the nobile species, and there can be only one, like Highlander, there is only one Dendrobium nobile. It's a species. If you've got that, it's a fussy tyke. And they're notoriously difficult to rebloom unless you get it right. The nobile hybrids have lost that fussiness, quite honestly. As far as I'm concerned, I do nothing special for this plant apart from make sure it's on a higher shelf close to the glass when the shade netting comes off. As far as feeding is concerned, these canes will have matured by the time we get to the autumn, so the amount of growing it's doing is next to nothing. Well, if it's not actively growing, does it need a lot of feed? Of course it doesn't. No? Will it need water? Yes. Otherwise it will shrivel. Yeah? But again, I will let it get properly dry in between waterings, and then I will give it, well, what I've always done in the past with my noblies is they get what I call a medium water, which means I pour some water in the top until I see it get down to sort of here. Not gushing out the bottom like I do this time of year, but the water's got mainly down to about 2/3 of the pot, and then I stop. Because water will be trapped in places and it will carry on trickling and it will get to the bottom of the pot. But it's not gushing out the bottom. It's enough to keep the canes hydrated and stop the roots desiccating and drying out, which will kill them, you know, so it needs some water. So drier, and as far as feed is concerned, if it's not doing much growing, then it doesn't need much. But it will get that hardening off nitrogen-free fertilizer in the autumn prior to going into the winter with the lower temperatures and the shorter days, which will just slow, even if this plant was still growing at that point, it'll slow it down. I can't do anything about that. I'm not having artificial lighting. Okay, so that one, similar to that, but not quite. Those plants will stay exactly where they live. They won't change position. I've said what I'm doing with those. This one, I will attempt to give it a bit more light than, you know, the others, just by moving the noblies right up to the glass when the shade netting comes off, so they get brighter light. The shade netting even comes off the roof in the winter. The sun doesn't really come in the roof in the winter. It's at such a low angle in the sky, it only comes in the sides. So that's that one. So why is this one in with those then? This is classed as a deciduous dendrobium. Yeah, it does lose its leaves eventually, but it loses them in stages. I'll go over that. This is Dendrobium hercoglossum, and this is a one-off. In my grow room, this gets treated differently to all the others, but it doesn't really. But what it does do is grow differently to all the others. It has a very different growth pattern. I wonder if that's a spike or... Do you know, if that's a kiki, it'll be the first one ever on that plant. This plant's never grown a kiki, it just blooms, and it does it very well in the spring. That got a first at the Orchid Society this year. So that one's doing okay. New growths on this one? Many. Yeah? Late in the year this year, but it doesn't matter on this plant. I don't care if it pushes out new growth in October as we go into winter. Makes no difference on this plant. I'll explain why. These new growths will continue growing for at least 2 years. They won't stop in the winter, they'll slow a bit, but they don't stop. Okay, let's see if we can find some different canes to look at. There we go. See, that's an older cane. Hasn't lost all of its leaves yet. You can see the ex-flower spikes down the cane. That has still got some space to bloom. 2 nodes at the top and several lower down. So that's bloomed once, it will bloom again in the places it didn't bloom the time before. But if you look at the top of the cane, it looks like it's finished growing. Yeah? It's got to that terminal look that you get where one leaf just sticks out the top and there's no sign of another one coming. What else have we got on this thing? We should have some... Oh, I cut them off, didn't I? I was going to say we should have some completely deciduous canes with no leaves, but I trimmed them off this year, so they're gone. There they are, there, look. There, you can see them just there, look, deciduous canes. The plant's big enough to take it, it's not a big deal. So anyway, new growth, pushing on any time from spring, almost constantly throughout the growing season. So you've got new ones just starting here, one's pushing on, one's getting their leaves. So this little setup here are this year's growths. And then you get the ones that are well leaved, like this, yeah? That's last year's growth. It hasn't finished growing yet, has it? So this would have been a new growth like those last year at some point. We're halfway through the growing season, it's still growing. Yeah? And it will carry on growing until it gets to its full size, at which point it will stop. Okay, so how do I treat this one then? This is supposed to have the proper, bright, drier winter rest. Well, it don't get it. And the reason it doesn't get it? Because it doesn't stop growing. I've got all the different types of canes on here as I go into winter. You know, some that are only halfway up to their full size. Some that are getting near to full size, some that have just finished growing are full size. That looks like another bud there too, possibly. Although if that cane's decided to do the kiki thing, that could be a partner. So I don't get to look at this one over closely that often because it lives up near the roof. So as far as my Hercoglossom is concerned, it lives near the roof. But it's this bit that lives near the roof. I'd have to turn the plant upside down to get the leaves up near the roof, but it's in the brightest part of the greenhouse. So, and that's where it stays all year round, yeah? So come the autumn, when the light levels, you know, drop down and our day lengths get shorter, this will still be in the brightest place I've got up near the roof. So that's how I look after it. I feed and water well. Now this hasn't been watered today, it was watered well yesterday and fed, so it was given a good soaking. None of this wishy-washy sprayer stuff. It had 3 or 4 glasses of water poured all over it, absolutely soaked, dripping wet. And it's still slightly damp today. We got a dull non-heat day today and no sun, so I don't need to water this today. That can wait till tomorrow now. If I watered it today, it won't hurt it. It's growing. Look at it. It's at it. Needs it. So this one never gets left dry for any length of time in the growing season. In the winter time, I do let it dry. And with those much lower temperatures, when I water it reasonably well in the winter. Not just a little pss, pss with the sprayer. It will get water poured on it and it will get wet. But it will last it an awful lot longer because of the lower temperatures and it's not growing as fast. So this one still gets watered and fed in the winter. It breaks all the rules. Rules for this one: dry, bright winter rest or you won't get it to bloom. Well, I get it to bloom every year and it just gets treated like most of my other orchids. It gets allowed to dry. It might stay dry a couple of days in the winter time, it won't hurt it, but it doesn't get any form of rest. Just the natural resting process that takes place in my place because it's winter. Not using as much water because it's not as warm, so it's not growing as fast. It gets no proper rest whatsoever. And if you look back at the videos and see how that bloomed this year, I haven't seen a better one yet. Anywhere. In any of the shows I've been to, the blooming on this one this year was stunning. You got a lot to live up to next spring, mate. Because I'm expecting at least that next year. If I ever get better, I don't know. I think that this year may have been its best ever, but we'll see how it goes. So that's the little set. They were clustered together because they're all going to stay in the grow room, and they will all get incredibly similar treatment through the grow room. They'll all get the same temperatures. As I said, this one, the Hercoglossum, and the Nobile will get the best light I can give them. Those will get what they get. They live up here where these big gaps are, basically, and they've always got other plants shading them. See, I mean, even this time you can see my Nobiles live up against the glass, or that one does, and the big one on the table there came out of that hole down there, and I had to move about 3 plants to get it out. But yeah, you know, the ones that don't need as much bright light, they can tuck in behind the bigger plants. They'll still get more than enough light. They won't be actively growing like stormtroopers like they are now, so they'll be fine. So that's how that little set get treated. There are others, but all of my Latorias and all of my Nobiles get treated the same. They get reduced water, they will get a change of feed this year, and that's how they will go. I think the next video I'll probably do those that if they don't get a form of proper winter rest, they're either not going to bloom at all or they're not going to bloom very well. So I'll do those next. So yeah, we're getting there. As I said, I never intended to film every single Nobile, but doing it this way, so all of these stay in the grow room, so they all get the same temperature ranges. They get similar light, although some will get a bit more, and watering is just greatly reduced because they're not growing as much. But to induce the blooms on this Nobile, I do nothing apart from keep it in here, and it's worked every year. I've had this plant quite a while now. It wasn't that big when I got it. It is a bit of a monster. So there we go. That's that little lot. But if anybody gets a Hercoglossum, watch the advice on it. As I said, it says it needs a dry, bright winter rest or it won't bloom. Well, I'm disputing that with visual evidence because mine bloomed really well and it didn't get that much light in the winter. Nothing gets that much light in the winter in this grow room because we don't get good light in the winter in the UK unless you do artificial lights, which I've explained why I'm not doing that. Okay, so that's this one done then. I'll just explain because I know it's sweet, but some people actually get a bit worried if I don't post. Think I might be ill or something. Well, apart from the odd little tummy bug now and again, I don't get ill, so don't ever think that. But what I am doing today is now Saturday late lunchtime, something like that, and it's my sister's birthday barbecue this afternoon, which will end like early evening, something like that. So this video I'll format and get ready this evening. Whether I post it today or tomorrow morning, I don't know, which will be Sunday morning. Sunday, tomorrow, is the Orchid Society's garden party. I certainly won't be doing any filming tomorrow. That's not going to happen. And then depending on other circumstances, I might have a travel day on Monday. I might not. That's undecided. If I'm not travelling around on Monday doing stuff, then Monday will be an opportunity to do some more filming. If not, it'll be Tuesday. So there could be some gaps here. Don't worry, I'm not dead. I haven't fallen out of a tree or anything like that. just having a bit of a rest. And I'm still tethered, as I've just explained, which does limit my mobility. But I'll leave that one for now then. I hope that's helped. You know, I know I got a feeling that some of my words on some of the dendrobiums, like things like Jenkinsii and stuff, have frightened people to death, and they're right, that's it, I'm not getting any dendrobiums, they're far too difficult. No, they're not, but some are. In amongst them are some real stinkers to try and get to bloom. Well, don't get those ones then, unless you really want a challenge, and if you can do what they need, they are incredibly rewarding. And if you get those types to bloom, big pat on the back. But nobly hybrids, quite honestly, anybody should be able to get those to bloom, unless you keep them in the dark. They'll be okay. They'll tolerate living in your home. They might need a bit of a spray now and again to keep the humidity up, but it's not something I need to do out here, that's for sure. But they don't mind a bit of humidity. They will tolerate it being quite low. But that needs more light than those three. So if you're going to try your first ever dendrobium, quite honestly, the Phalaenopsis types, to me, seem the easiest to be able to grow in the home. Yeah? They'll need a bit more light than your Phalaenopsis. So, you know, if you've got your Phalaenopsis on a table, make sure those are the nearest to the window, rather than the Phalaenopsis. Give them that little bit of priority. But apart from that, you can treat them like your Phalaenopsis. You know, when they get dry, water them. And give them some feed now and again if they're actively growing. It's quite simple. If you can grow Phalaenopsis, you should be able to grow the Dendrobium Phalaenopsis hybrids. Okay, the others might be a little bit more adventurous. And as I say, I don't know yet. Latorias are new to me. So the success of how I'm treating them won't be known till next year, really. But I don't see me killing any anyway. And Noblies aren't bad for in the home, but as you can see, they do get a bit big now and again. They don't all get that size, but they do have a tendency to be quite large plants. And as they age and you start adding years in, they get bigger. You'll find there's a progression. You'll probably, if you buy a Nobly hybrid, it will have canes on it that are your goal to achieve, because they'll be some of the best canes it's going to have, because it's been nursery grown. Perfect, or near perfect conditions to get it like that. Your next new growths might not be as good. They might only be half that size, but that doesn't mean they won't bloom. Yeah? And the difference with the blooming on the Nobly types is the blooms come out right down the cane in little clusters of anything from 1 to about 4. I don't think I've ever seen a Nobly with 5 blooms on a little cluster, but the little spikes just come out of there between the leaves. You know, one each, they come out under the leaf basically, so this one will bloom from there, the other spike will be around that side and then round this side and so on. And it may not bloom on every cane in any given year. If it's got absolutely spot on conditions that are just right for that hybrid, you'll get that mass blooming if you treat it right, and it will produce the spikes the full length of the cane. And boy, is that a spectacle. But I'm quite happy for mine to split and do quite a lot of buds one year and then push a few more out the next year, which is what mine tend to do. So there we go. That's another set of dendrobiums, and hopefully that's eased some people's minds. Dendrobium Phalaenopsis hybrids, pretty good in the house, and some of the easiest to grow, quite honestly. Just don't keep them soggy all the time. Let them get towards dryness before you water them again. Noblies, same, pretty easy going, but need a bit more light. Yeah, so you've got your Phalaenopsis, these types, they need a certain amount of light. Then the Dendrobium Phalaenopsis need a bit more. These need a bit more again. So these do need to be quite good light. They don't need Cattleya light or Vanda light, but they need good light. Yeah? And then they'll grow well and reward you with the blooms late winter, early spring. They have a season. They bloom after the winter. Strictly speaking, it's after the winter rest, but as I've already said, this doesn't get much of a rest, but it does get a bit of one. The Dendrobium phalaenopsis will bloom when it flipping well likes, like I said, when it's ready. So there are some easy dendrobiums. I've got more different dendrobiums that are also easy, but they don't come into this set. Well, easy for me, I suppose. Anyway, I'll leave that one at that for now, and as I say, if there's some gaps in the videos, it's because I'm doing other things. So this afternoon we got barbecue. I expect there might be a beer or two lurking in there somewhere. Don't do wine with barbecue. It's beer. Beers with barbecue. Yeah. And let's hope the sun comes out. Right, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.